everybody. Welcome to the Dead Money with Dan Arfin podcast. I think I'm just going to do nothing but stories today, and then the next episode will have this week's hand histories and ranting commentaries and whatever else have you, which there will be plenty of. But for now, just stories of a bunch of unnecessary things. First quick tidbit. There was this guy, some reggae player I think I've seen before, but not very much. He was having a huge day. He caught a huge punt with a set against some other try-hard wannabe, check jamming like 400 big blinds with pocket aces on like a 10-high board. So he gets to look all badass. Then comes a hand where he raises to 25. There was one call, and then the big blind squeezed to $140, and all three players are deep. And this 3-bet size is very much what thinking players recognize as completely standard. When people open, the out-of-position 3-better is going between 4 and 5 times whatever that amount is, plus the dead money from anyone who called the open. So if no one called the original open to 25, the typical out-of-position 3-bet is going to be around $100, maybe up to 125. With a caller in there, now we're looking at 125, 150, and some regs would probably advocate going even bigger than that. But for this, we'll just accept 4 to 5 times plus the dead money as the working figure. So this 3-bet size is completely normal. Yet this reg, who probably feels like he's such hot shit now because he's up a good 3,000 or 4,000, he now says, "What? Like, that's way too big. I can't call that. That's nonsense." He called it nonsense. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is because you see how empowered and how good poker can make a person feel about themselves when they catch a break and then someone decides to donate to them? Because that comment right there tells you just about everything you need to know about this player. Certainly everything that's pertinent. Nonsense? He called that size nonsense? This is like forgetting the alphabet. Buddy, if you don't want to risk the 3-bet getting up to $140, then don't open 5 times the big blind. You can just go 4x or even 3x, which is what more than half the player pool in 2-5 does easily. My standard is 4x. If we've got whales in there that are V-pipping extremely high and don't care about the size, then yeah, I'm going to push it to 5x or 6x, maybe even higher. I'm amazed at how many other regs don't do that. Then the next day, this new-faced regular player was on the button. I think he's some type of European, although I can't tell from where, but he actually seems pretty competent. Anyway, he wasn't paying attention, nor was the big blind. What else is new? Players not paying attention. Never know when it's their turn. So the big blind didn't know he was the big blind. He thought he was under the gun, so he makes it 20 at a turn. But people start folding, and he gets to the euro on the button, and he folds. But then he realized what the mistake was, and that he would have raised his hand rather than fold it if he had known at the time what was happening. But then this guy, who's always been very quiet so far, all of a sudden he's like, "Oh, fuck, I thought he was under the gun. Oh, no, I wanted to play that hand. I would have raised." He got so exasperated in a pot which no one called. And then the big blind showed that he had pocket sixes, so okay, not a monster, but obviously a battle-worthy hand. But the euro just kept going till I finally said, I'm like, all right, it's okay. Like, just calm down, which is quite rich coming from me. But he's like, I wanted to play that hand. I had ace-9 off. He's like, you don't open that from the button? I was like, I didn't say that. I said, I didn't know what you had. I'm just saying you're acting as though there's no chance you would not have stacked him. Then I tell him, flop, ace-9, 6. 9 on the river. And yeah, maybe that's what would have happened. We don't know. Now look, I understand why he was perturbed. I mean, we only get to play so many hands and you hate to give away a spot, any spot, for this reason. And the big blind was definitely a fish too, but I don't know. I guess I was just a little taken back as to how hard he reacted to this. Oh well, I guess I respect his commitment. So then I stood up for a dealer. There's this black lady, been dealing to me for many years. She's some type of African, I forget where from. She's competent. She's even-keeled. She's always pleasant-natured. I came back to the table after taking a wee-wee, and I see that she's arguing with a player. And after some brief deducing, what happened was he had also been away from the table, so he missed his blinds, and she told him if he wanted a hand, he's going to have to post his small blind and big blind. But he was telling her, perhaps a bit more aggressively than necessary, that he wanted to wait for his natural big blinds. Okay, that's allowed. Most often when a player does that, they don't wait at the table for 3 or 4 hands or whatever it'll take, but, that's allowed too. But then I guess she said to him, okay, you don't have to scream at me. And this man looked in his late 40s or more, some type of Middle Eastern, because he had an accent. And then he starts giving her hell about that. He was going on and on. Don't tell me I am screaming. Don't tell me not to scream. I am not your friend. Which seemed to be peculiar reasoning. And this is what's so funny about poker and how it just always brings out the worst in people. The things they say, for the reasons they say them, are so bafflingly stupid. What does being a person's friend and telling them not to scream at you have to do with each other? She can't tell him to cool it in the way she tells him to unless they're friends? Was that his point? But then he really crossed the line, okay? I didn't catch every word of it, but then he's carrying on still about her being out of line and don't talk to me about screaming and don't scream at me. And he's like, I am not like the problems you're having with your husband. And she really froze and glared at him when he said that. And to her credit, she bit her tongue. She did not lash out, but if looks could kill, I mean, that's when I spoke up and said to him, the dealer is not out of line. You are out of line. And then I said it a second time. He didn't quite ignore me, but he didn't really engage me either. I mean, whatever he said back to me was just more of the same. It didn't really make any sense either. Then she called a floor man over, and he was talking to the guy off the table, and this happened right as I was transferring tables. Now, dealers feel very alone and probably small when this is happening. I've seen female dealers cry in the box more than just a couple times. But any dealer, man or woman, I think they really, really like it when a player will step up for them even just a little bit. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Just knowing there's one person in this game willing to say something on their behalf when they don't have to, it means a lot for them. It goes a long way. And most of the time I don't get involved because whatever the gripe is, it's usually not worthy of me intervening and sticking my beak in because, a lot of people do that strictly because they love hearing themselves talk and love making themselves look like they know what to say in a situation like this because they're the smartest person in the room and they're the voice of reason. But I like this dealer. She's nice. And whether or not she handled him perfectly at first, telling him he doesn't have to scream at her, is not even the point. I don't care about that. This guy is a fucking asshole who clearly can't take anything that he perceives as orders from women. That much is without a doubt when he starts talking about her and her husband. Which as soon as he said that, I looked at her hands to see if she was wearing a ring, and she wasn't. So, maybe she's never been married, maybe she killed her husband, I mean, no one knows. But either way, for him to go there, wow. So then a little while after I get to the new table, it's getting late, we're probably past midnight at this point. Playing a lot more evening and overnight lately. There's a seat open or two, and then this other reg walks by the table. It's a young Euro. I've seen him a small handful of times too. He happens to be walking past me, and you know what he fucking says to me? He asks, "Is this game good action?" I said to him, "Why don't you sit down and find out?" Which I didn't want him to do, but I still think that's the only thing to say to a question like that. I mean, because are you fucking kidding me? I don't know this kid. We don't know each other. And the 2-5 player pool is just overrun with so many little shits, whether they do this or whether they do that. There's such little shits in so many of their own unique ways. It's crazy. You don't flagrantly go up to the table bum hunting and start asking the game if there's action in it. You don't fucking do that. This is common sense 101. Now, if suppose someone got up from the table to go take a wee-wee or something, and then he asked, "Hey, how's the game?" to someone he doesn't know, even it's a little weird, but it's not nearly as retarded as what he did. And then he stands there and he's watching. And you can't do that either. That's weird too. That's even weirder than what he asked. But he walks away in the middle of the first hand he's watching. Then I said to the dealer, I guess after seeing one half of a hand, you determined this game is not good enough. And you know what the dealer said? He's like, yeah, he's not any action either. And yeah, of course, no action player would ask that question. Only a nit would. Now look, I know as pros or even non-pros, but people who would like to win, we're doing our best to size up games and figure out if it's worth it. But there's a proper way of doing that. You want to stand around the room for a little bit and subtly eyeball the tables? Go right ahead. You don't go up to the table and ask that because he's basically asking, hey, are you guys fish who are going to dump to me since I'm a nit? I mean, that's how we can all translate that question. I mean, instead of asking that, why didn't he just go up to each player and ask for whatever amount of money he'd like them to give him? Wouldn't it be that much different? Fucking moron. But it makes me wonder, did I used to be that stupid? I mean, not in that exact manner, of course. I would never do that. But was I that stupid when I was his age? Probably. Probably worse, too. Whatever. So, on to this past Friday night, which was a long night. I played over 15 hours into Saturday morning. And towards the start of the day, I was playing with the blue whale again. Hadn't seen him much for a little while, but now he's back. And I'm wondering if he knows just how hard I'm bum hunting him, although I will say he's playing a little better lately. He's still extremely loose pre-flop and very bad at poker, but he's not paying off nearly as much as he used to, and not tilting quite as hard. So I guess, calling all sizes on the river and being shown a better hand 90 to 95% of the time he does it eventually made him realize he should probably stop doing that unless his hand is, above excellent. In any event, he's on my left, and I wanted him on my right. A player left that would allow me to get him much closer to my right, so I went to take it, but then he shows me he has the seat change button, vetoing my request, and I just say, okay, and that was it. But it's funny when I think about this, because I'm always willing to change seats once at every table, yet I never ask for the seat change button, but whatever. So he wants that seat instead of letting me have it, which I'm totally fine with, since it puts him closer to my right anyway. But then, as soon as this is settled, he table changes. And now I'm left wondering, was this coincidence with the timing? Was he trying to get a table change anyway? Or was he just trying to say, fuck you, and then caught a floor man right as he was going by and asked if he could move so he didn't have to play with me anymore? I really don't know, but I didn't care to chase him around the room this time. I just let him go and stayed on my table, which was a really good game even without him. Then I saw a guy check raise the turn. The board was Jack 10, 6, 7, 2 spades. The 6 and the 7 were both spades. And then the guy who got check raised, then he rejammed all in and was called. But before he was called, the check raiser asked, how much more is it? And then at showdown, this player who asked how much more is it after check raising and calling, he turns over 9-8 of spades. So he had the nut straight on the turn, and he also had the nut open-ended straight flush draw on top of it. Yet when he was jammed on, he still wanted to know how much more it was before he called. Okay. And the funny thing was, I said to him, you had the nuts, but you wanted to know how much more he had for you to call? And he had some kind of accent too. He was like, no, I wasn't being cheeky. I just wanted to know how much he had. And I felt like I believed him, but I don't get it. You have the almightiest of almighty nutted hands. Why are you asking that question? Is the answer to that question even remotely capable of influencing your decision? No. So then I repeat, why are you asking that? So Chad dealt to me the other day. That's Chad Phillips. If you haven't heard Chad, do go check him out from episode 60, the Christmas Day special edition of Dead Money. And while Chad was in the box, something funny happened. The guy on my left, he won a hand when I was the big blind, so the next hand I'm the small blind. But as I'm posting my small blind, he accidentally thought it was part of the pot he just won and pulled it in, which you see once in a while, no big deal. So I just told him, hey, you took my small blind. He was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. This is a middle-aged white guy with glasses losing his hair. And I said, I know, it's okay. I'm just telling you. And then he gave me $1 to atone for his clear accidental thievery, which is a very white person thing to do. I said, okay, thank you. I don't need to be tipped. I was just telling you about the small blind. If you want to give that dollar to somebody, why don't you give it to the dealer? Then I said to Chad, there it is again, right? With players passing chips to another player. Did you hear that episode? Talking about episode 61 right now. Chad says, yeah. He's like, I heard it. I don't like it. Going to do a quick recap here from episode 61 because I'm still pissed off about that. So to make a long story short, this drunken, obnoxious European, whatever the fuck, tried to give a $100 chip to his black female companion across the table, which would bring her stack up from about $300 to $400, which you are not allowed to do. And the only reason it was vetoed was because I did the dealer's job. I had to get a floor man involved. It was this whole thing. And this all happened because the dealer was this woman who not only made zero effort to prevent this, but singled me out as she was being replaced by another dealer since that's when this happened. The Euro asked her, am I allowed to do this? And instead of just doing her job and saying no, she told him no, or I don't care. I something along the lines of like not caring, but then she hand gestured towards me and said, he's not going to let you do that. What the fuck kind of fucking shit is that? I've seen a lot of unprofessional things from dealers. I've seen them get out of line and rude and snippy and whiny and do all kinds of bullshit things. But I don't think I've ever seen a single dealer do anything more unprofessional than single out another player and paint this picture of him to be like this unpleasant stickler who's here to ruin everybody's good time when he's not even fucking doing anything except sitting there and watching. And we know Chad would not have stood for this. He would have, without being a dick about it, just said, no, I can't let you do that, and made him give the chip back to his stack. Make the girl give the chip back to the guy. Then the guy would have played with him, we did it yesterday, and Chad would have said, all right, well, look, it's a rule you're not allowed to do, and I can't let you do it. That's what a dealer is supposed to do. And that is why I have been tipping less and less and less as the years go on, because more and more dealers very simply refuse to do their fucking job. None of them want to do their job. They want to deal the hands and have you line their pockets when you win a big pot and go home. That's what they have to say. Anything that involves actually stepping in and preventing players from taking over the game, no, they're not interested. And how many dealers are there that simply don't get it? They think you take care of me and I'll do my job. No. It's called you have to do your job and then we'll take care of you. It's not something for nothing. Told you, I've dealt poker and I've dealt plenty of tables that weren't tipping and it never stopped me from working hard. Because it's important to me that I have just a little bit of integrity when I'm doing something. The worst tips I ever got on one table was, guess what? 2019 World Series of Poker. I'm doing the King's Lounge. That's the high limit cash game section at the Rio. 5, 10, 25 pot limit Omaha. Now we know PLO gets a lot fewer hands in, but it was like 4 in the fucking morning. And the table was very lively, very sociable. So you'd think they'd be tipping, right? No. $2. That's what I got. I got a $1 tip on 2 pots, and that was it. And so be it, because dealers have variance as well. And that doesn't make it okay for you to be this whiny, lazy, spiteful baby acting like this is all about you, because let's remember one thing. And I'm talking to all of the entitled dealers right now, and you all know who you are. Just how much do you think your fucking job is really worth? I don't care how good you are at dealing the game. Do you know how easily you will be replaced if they get rid of you or if you quit? We don't get to play poker because you guys showed up to deal. You get to deal because we want to play poker. You work for us, okay? If poker players don't like variance, then they don't have to play. And if you don't like the variance that comes with your job, then you don't have to deal. It's that simple. Dealers make their own luck just like players do. And you know what happened before Chad got pushed? A player transferred to another table and gave Chad all of his blue chips. Every one of his dollar blue chips. And there were over 20 of them. Now, it's not that Chad is entitled to have that happen every down, but he does a good job. He cares. He does what a good dealer is supposed to do. So once in a while, stuff like that happens. He would never, ever be caught dead singling out another player at a table that he expected to enforce a rule that he didn't feel like enforcing because he's too much of a lazy, entitled fuckstick to give a shit. And when you know it, later that night, the same duo, the woman who singled me out the other day, she was on my table eventually again, too. And she did something I never saw before. She dealt a 2-card flop. Not a mistake of any real consequence. She just put out the 3rd card, but it was funny. Because that got me thinking, that'd be a funny variation of Hold'em, right? Deal the game in reverse. You got your initial betting round with 2 cards, then you deal the river, then you deal the turn, and then you deal the flop. Surprised I haven't heard about people doing that yet. They're such fucking animals. Anyway, so then later in the night, we get this really tall and friendly Indian fish. And he was sitting to my left in seat 7. I was in seat 6. And seat 7 and seat 2 are pretty much as far away from the center of the table where the community cards are. And on multiple occasions, he was failing very badly to protect his hands. And like always, I didn't say anything. But it's interesting because usually when this happens, it's from a player on my right. I can't think of a time where this happened with a player on my left. But there really wasn't that much for me to exploit because I think he was a little more mindful of this when I still had my hands. But like I said, since he's far away from the center of the table, he was also having problems seeing the community cards. He was consistently standing up and sticking his big long ET neck out over the table to see what was what. And after a while, it just looked a little odd, but seat 5 was empty. And seat 5 is, of course, the closest to the board than any other seat. So I said to him, and I wasn't being rude, I said to him, that seat over there is open. Like, do you want to take it? Now, it's true that this was obviously going to make life easier on him, but that's not even why I was suggesting that. I just wanted to get him on my right. If we were in opposite seats and he was doing that, there's no way I'd have said that. But after suggesting it, he sounded a little mildly defensive at first. He's like, why? Do you think that'll help? I said, well, yeah, you'll be a lot closer to the cards. I said, isn't that the strategy you're already using every time you stick your head across over the table? Because you're trying to get your eyes closer to the cards? And people start laughing when I say this because it's just like, dude, what? Like, I'm not even trying to make these people look stupid with my responses. I just don't know how else to respond to this. They're making themselves look stupid. Like, do you realize what this guy just asked me? How the fuck am I supposed to answer that without making him look like an idiot? Just because a person is a fish at poker, it doesn't mean they're a stupid person. It just means they're not good at poker. But I don't get what it is sometimes about this game and how it just causes people to behave in such bizarre manners. You can get such a good look at what a person is like watching them play cards. There's, of course, much more to them than that. But think about this. If you watch a person play poker for an hour, you will learn far more about them than if you watch them do anything else for an hour. If you watch them go bowling for an hour, if you watch them go to a sewing class for an hour, or a cooking class, or a jazz concert, or anything. It's really quite the phenomenon. So then he did move seats, and gee, what do you know? He stopped sticking his head over the whole table. Although he did get up at one point, and his pants weren't pulled all the way up, so I got a nice little glance at the top of his ass crack. Crack kills, as you know. He was losing for a while, but then he caught fire, of course. But at some point, he said something I've never heard anyone say at the table. Out of nowhere, he's just like, why am I such a degenerate gambler? I was here until 9 a.m. yesterday. I said, I guess it passes the time. And then later he says, poker is a great game. He's like, you don't need to speak English. Because we had an Asian man who knew very little English. He only knew the necessary poker terms. But then he said to me, he's like, you haven't said a word all night. Where are you from? I thought about it for a few seconds. I was like, I'm from Kuwait. And he believed me. Or at least he wasn't sure. He said a minute later, he's like, wait, are you really from Kuwait? I guess I said it very convincingly. I said, no, I'm not from Kuwait. I'm from New York. He's like, New York. This is all after he won his money back, of course, and probably more. Now, it's not that he was unpleasant when he was losing. He was very friendly then, too. But, hey, every rec player takes a page out of his For He's a Jolly Good Fellow book when he's winning. So this aforementioned Asian fellow who knew next to no English, he needed some red chips when he sat down, so he gives a black chip to this white guy, another fish, who gives him a stack of red that was clearly short of $100. I said, there's no way that's $100. It was probably 70 at most. So then he starts making the stack the right size, and at this point I looked away. But then there was some confusion where the white guy suddenly realized he was missing some chips, and that he gave the guy too many red chips. And then I look up and he says to me, he's like, didn't you see me count it out? I was like, what am I, the dealer? I wasn't watching. I noticed that the stack was under $100, but I didn't carefully watch you cut it out for him. I figured you had it under control. I mean, look, it was no big deal. It was just funny that for a moment he seemed to have expected me to supervise this process. And it's just like I'm having yet another excruciating night full of aggravation. And now on top of it, I'm being called out for not watching him make sure he can count $100 in red chips. And then when he stood up, his pants were also not pulled up all the way, so I got a nice look at the top of his ass crack as well. It's been that type of run. So to close this long session, I finished up at the Aria. I lost wire to wire. Oh, big shock there. Not a total shellacking, but enraging as usual, in what was a really good game for a while. But there was one problem. I raised to 30 with king-queen off, the huge fish calls, and a reg calls on the button. The flop comes ace, jack, deuce, 2 diamonds. I don't have any diamonds. I'm first to act. I haven't said anything or moved or done anything. And I was looking at my stack, and then I bet 55. And then the dealer looks up at me and says, kind of with an attitude, he's like, you can't do that once they've already checked. So right when I looked down, both players checked out a turn. And now the dealer is trying to punish me for this. I told him I didn't do anything, and no one else said anything. No other cue was given. Nothing. And then the reg on the button says, this is to his advantage. He's like, it's unfortunate because we both acted already. Acting as though this is going to stand and I won't get to bet. So the dealer calls a floor lady, and thankfully she was competent. He explained that he hadn't motioned to anybody or said, hey, it's your turn. These 2 players just acted out of turn. So she allowed my bet to stand, and then they both folded. So, all's well that ends well. But I was just annoyed that this had to be done. After the hand, I was just like, you know something, you guys just bet whenever you feel like betting, and that'll be the action because the dealer doesn't pay attention. And then he gave it back to me a little. Not too much. He's like, okay. He's like, that's why I got the floor to make the ruling, sir. And I just let it go after that. But it's irritating because I don't understand how dealers make these mistakes. You can't make these mistakes. And it's very distracting whenever the dealer makes a mistake, even if it's inconsequential and resolved correctly and quickly. It's still just unnerving to have your focus temporarily shaken up because the dealer wasn't paying attention. What the fuck was he doing? When he deals, whether it's the flop or any point in the hand, his eyes need to be following the action. His eyes should always be on whoever's turn it is to act and then just move like a swivel. So when this 3-way flop is being dealt, as soon as he's done it, his eyes should go right to me. And when he sees peripherally that other players are acting out of turn, he can stop them and tell them, no, it's not your turn yet, wait. So it just drives me nuts, wondering what the hell are these dealers doing and why do they refuse to pay attention? This job is a big responsibility, it really is. And I feel like maybe this isn't communicated that well during the busy hiring processes when tournament series need 1 million dealers all at once, and they just need bodies, so they don't have time to go through all this. They just need people who can pitch a card or 2, and that's it. They don't teach them the value of anything else. They all end up having to learn in a very unpleasant manner because poker players are not the nicest people. And they get out of line over plenty of things, but this is not one of them. You cannot get caught napping. It looks really bad, and it is really bad. Not as bad as it is in the air traffic control tower, but you can't be slacking off, gazing off, spacing off in the middle of a fucking hand. Ever. You have to be attentive at all times. Dealing poker is in some ways a very easy job if you would just do it, but in other ways it's hard because there are a lot of things you have to do. And if you don't pay attention, you're going to see how easy it is to screw up left and right. And as players, it gets on your nerves. Which reminds me of something I heard players say to each other once when I was dealing. The player said, when the dealer makes a mistake, whose fault is it? And the guy says, who? The player says, the player. And in a way, he's right. It's shitty, but most dealers, you have to pay attention to them because they get caught not paying attention all the time. There's a very small percentage of dealers who, across the board, do this job correctly. And those are the ones I tip frequently. But all right, that will do for this week. Next episode, I'm going to recap some of the highlight hands from this week. And plus, there are some very interesting stories that which occurred within those hands, but we'll get to that later. So we'll see you next time.